Most financial advisors believe that they're delivering consistent value to their clients. But in reality, without a structure, the client experience can often feel random, reactive, and quite forgettable. That's why the service matrix is such a powerful tool. Internally, it can bring clarity, accountability, and consistency into your service model. But when you take it a step farther and you evolve it into a client-facing version, it transforms into something even more impactful. It becomes an advocacy-driving value display tool. In this episode, we're going to walk through how top advisors are using this service matrix, both internally and externally, to elevate the client experience, reinforce their value, and increase client advocacy. Let's get started.
This is The Rare Advisor, a show for financial advisors who want to build and grow their practice through the use of a business model supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. The Rare Advisor is brought to you by the Advisor Protocol Consulting Team at USA Financial.
Welcome back to another edition of The Rare Advisor. I'm your host, Aaron Grady, and with me today is my cohort, my fellow coach, Allan Oehrlein. Allan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. Always a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm glad you could make the time. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that I know you and I really enjoy coaching to this. It may not be as much of a joy for you, but I enjoy talking about this. It's the idea around the service matrix. Mm-hmm. The service matrix is a foundational internal tool that teams use. And we're going to talk about how you can evolve that tool into a powerful client-facing resource that really drives loyalty, it drives advocacy, and ultimately drives predictability in your practice. And I know these are two really big, powerful concepts. And so let's jump in and let's really talk about how the service matrix and the stewardship framework, how those two things work together inside of a practice. Sure. So to kind of kick this off today, Allan, let's talk about the why. Specifically, let's talk about why you would want a service matrix. We'll talk about what exactly a service matrix is. And, I know you and I were discussing this before the call. Maybe we're getting the cart before the horse. But I think through our conversation, helping an advisory team understand why this matters before we tell them what it is, I think really makes sense in this individual situation. So let's talk about, what are some of the reasons or some of the pitfalls that come with not having a service matrix for your advisory practice.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of the times it comes down to that reactive versus proactive stance when it comes to the level of service that you're providing for your top clients. When we typically get into coaching relationships with a brand new advisor and we're talking through some of the opportunities and challenges and concerns that they have, many of the times it's they feel like they're just kind of running the practice with their hair on fire with not a lot of direction, and they're becoming incredibly reactive to what's happening in the practice. When something comes up along the lines of, hey, have we had that outreach or that touch to that top client? When's the last time we talked to them? Do I need to make a quick call just to touch base and make sure that they know I'm still around and doing some work behind the scenes? So many times that becomes sort of a snowball effect where you start to notice it with a couple of your top clients, then a few more, and then something gets thrown on the plate of the firm that has to be done, like RMDs, for example. And a lot of those top clients kind of fall to the back burner inevitably. So by being more proactive and creating a process and a system around having those high touches around those top clients, it really alleviates that problem and takes away that one particular pitfall, which in turn ends up freeing up a lot of time for them. With that, also
I love the
inconsistent client experience, which I think you were going to maybe touch on. So.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, I love that idea of the being more proactive. Stop being a reactive firm and be more proactive in the approach. That's great.
Yep. And advisors, obviously, everyone always has the best intentions. They want to provide that high level of service. And most of the time it's executed, very well. Sometimes, again, variables will pop up that won't allow you to be as consistent as you'd like to be. And that can, of course, lead to more problems down the road as well, especially if you're onboarding a brand new client. They go through a fantastic first impression and client experience. They go and tell their friend about it. And the worst thing that can happen there is they don't get the same level of experience and high touch that the previous person that referred them over did. And again, that can lead to some issues as well. So just another thing about the consistency of having that process in place and the benefits behind having that process.
I love it. I love the idea of creating consistency in a client experience. It's, we use the word predictability, but I think consistency is something that clients can feel. When I talk about this a lot with advisory teams, there's always the want to, right? There's the want to, and you address that. People want to, and then they're inconsistent about the execution. But I think there's another element to it as well, is when we talk about the why behind doing this, is we're insulating our clients, by continuing to work to elevate the client experience, being more intentional about stepping outside the bounds of just being a financial advisor who, it's the blocking and tackling of what you do. It's the, we build a financial plan, we manage the assets, and then we meet once a year. You get paid to do that. And no disrespect, it's sometimes a little bit of table stakes. And so a lot of advisors, like you said, try to elevate this approach. And the answer is, or the question is always why? Well, the why is what leads to advocacy? What leads to client retention? It's when you step outside of the bare minimum and you start doing these little things sometimes, and sometimes big things that continue to insulate your clients, that continue to create top of mind awareness, that continue to help you drive advocacy. There's a couple of ideas and concepts that we talk about, specifically around loyalty and client retention. Having a consistent delivery of your service matrix helps war against loyalty fatigue and the law of familiarity. The idea that the longer that a relationship's in place, the more likely it is that you're going to take it for granted. And we all face that in our day-to-day lives. And so as a financial advisor, how do you continue to insulate your clients from all those outside forces? And part of that is something that's strategically process driven and intentional about creating an experience for your clients. The other part too is it's simply an internal tool for your clients, or not for clients, for your team, to cut out the confusion. It helps your team understand who gets what, when do they get it, and probably more importantly, why do they get it? Why does this client receive this level of care and this client receive this level of care? Now, we're going to talk about something in a few minutes, Alan, that in a lot of circumstances when we engage with teams, there is no this person gets this and this person gets this because of a certain thing. It's everybody gets treated the same. Why there's only any differences is what you said, is there's inconsistency in the delivery. Hey, we intend to give everybody the same level of care, but we're inconsistent about executing the care at all. So
yeah, right.
So there's some key things. So definitely, if you're looking to drive advocacy, if you're continuing to insulate against your clients, if you're trying to create more predictability, less chaos, and more of a proactive, this is why you want to define a service matrix. So let's step away from the why. Let's talk about the what. So when we think about what is a service matrix, now there may be some confusion. Some people think about a service matrix as a tool that basically captures all of the nuts and bolts of stuff you're doing. Well, we process paperwork, or we make sure that your withdrawals come out. So, well, that's operational stuff. What the service matrix really is, it's an internal structure to capture the defining service levels, the experience type stuff for different client segments. And it allows you to delegate and create process clarity for your entire team. And so this is really about allowing you to say, some examples might be, you're going to get your strategy and tactical meeting twice a year for this level of client, and this level of client's going to get once a year. And then we're going to have our newsletter is going to go out to these people. And then we're also going to do our email drip campaign for these people. And then maybe we do a personal financial organizer, and we're going to do that for these clients at this level. Maybe it's a topic that we've talked about in the past, Alan, the personal financial organizer. Well, we're only going to do it for these clients. Maybe it's the concept around the moments of truth, the seminal moments in a client's life, which we did a rare video on that talks about, that a moment in time in a client relationship that you can take advantage of these seminal moments to really deepen and personalize the client experience and the relationship and drive advocacy. Well, if you don't have a process behind that, how do you do it? So this is an internal resource that you build out that tracks all of these things, both things that you do behind the scenes to create an amazing client experience, but also things that you may do outward, like ideal client events, where you may tell your clients we're going to do events. And so all of those are captured on this resource so that your team can know who does what, when, and for who, and why. So I know you've got some thoughts there as well, Allan.
Yeah, and in my mind, ultimately what it's doing is helping create that level of consistency, scalability, and also a very high level of professional contrast. So look at it like it's not just organizing your practice, but it's about systematizing your value that you provide. So if we back up to the consistency aspect, I know we talked about this just a few minutes ago, but having that consistent model of knowing exactly what to do in every single scenario that could potentially come up on the service side is going to do drastic things for not only the internal team, making sure that they're operating at the most efficient level, but it also shows that level of professional contrast that you do have when outward clients are looking in at your firm and at your practice itself. The next part of that scalability, again, getting these systems down, freeing up more time, allowing you to spend more time on the revenue generating activities for the top level clients, the AAAs and the AAs. And once you're really able to put the right parts in place and the foundational aspects of your practice, knowing who you want to bring on, what that ideal client looks like, allows you to start bringing on more of those ideal clients, those AAA clients, from that point on. And then kind of to wrap everything up with a nice bow on top is that high level of professional contrast that is going to be shown throughout, just demonstrating the system that you put together and being consistent. And people will start to see you as someone above and beyond of what a typical financial advisor does. It's not just the managing the assets and the investments. And obviously that's very important. It's crucial to what we do, but what are you doing above and beyond that is going to make you advocacy worthy?
I love it.
Key things to remember.
Yeah, well said. The advocacy worthy is such a key thought in all of this. Is how do you continue year over year to, as you said, professional contrast, but advocacy worthy? How do I continue to stay top of mind, which we know that's a big part of client advocacy? How do we stay top of mind in a way that makes us worthy of that, going out there waving the flag? So I absolutely love that thought. And the scalability one too. I think that was the one that we face a lot when we talk to advisors, when we first engage in this concept is, for advisors, so often they're doing the same thing for everybody.
Yeah.
And, if you've got 200 households, it's hard to create a high level of care for that many people. And so the idea of saying, okay, and this goes back to another conversation we could have around segmentation, which we probably should do a rare video on that as well, is the idea of why do we compartmentalize and segment for different, but the idea ultimately is around that top 20% of clients that generate 80% of your revenues, and how do we replicate them? Mm-hmm. And if we're targeting a smaller audience, we can create a higher level of care for a smaller group. So love those thoughts down. That's really well said. So let's pivot. So we talked about the service matrix. I think the service matrix is a foundational, fundamental element that every practice should have in place. Mm-hmm. Regardless of size of practice, regardless of product offerings, I think every practice should have a service matrix. The client-facing version, which is what we're going to talk about now, what we call the stewardship framework. We gave it a name. And the reason we did, some people will just say their client-facing service matrix. Right. The reason why we gave it a separate name was to help the teams and advisors delineate the purpose and the function of the two resources ultimately. But essentially, they're akin to one another, but one's an extraction of the other.
Right.
The stewardship framework, we'll talk about the the elements, the what it is, and some how to execute some elements of it. But first, let's talk about the why.
Sure.
And, you know, what I would share with most advisors is, you know, as I said, get your service matrix built. Make sure that your service matrix runs efficiently. Make sure you're comfortable with that service matrix first. And then let's talk about how do I take that and turn it into a client-facing resource that can help me drive value in my practice, but also drive advocacy. And we'll talk about those whys here in a second. But this brings me, this is important for us to start here, Allan. So we've done this long enough, and we've done this in live studio audiences in front of groups of advisors.
Yep.
Whenever we bring up this concept, I would have to say personally myself, next to the idea and concept of the fit meeting, the concept that gets the most pushback from advisors next to the fit meeting is this concept. The idea of a client-facing resource, physical or otherwise, that delineates commitment to an elevated client experience and service. What would you say is the number one, one of the number one, or one of the objections that you hear the most? I know when you roll this out to advisors.
Sure. So as we're going through this exercise and we've created the service matrix and we're moving on to the stewardship framework, it's kind of an exciting first couple calls, right? Where you're going through and you're listing out what are the high level concierge touches that I'm going to provide for each level of each tier of clients, right? What are some of the fun events I'm going to be doing to promote advocacy and show client appreciation, and so on and so forth. But by the time you're done, many times you've got a page and a half, 2 pages. You need to whittle it down to 1 page, and then it sort of the reality of it sets in. How am I going to execute all this stuff? I don't want to be over promising and under delivering. That's when it shifts from the fun part to reality. And this is going to be too much. Do I need to take some things off? And that'll start the whole conversation of, do I have my core competencies down first from the service matrix? Am I adequately going to be able to provide strategy and tactical meetings or annual review meetings, acknowledge those moments of truth as they come up, execute my forum calls? And then on top of that, I've got this stewardship framework. So that's the big one. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head of asking yourself, am I going to be able to execute on all these things I'm now promising for my top tier of clients?
I love it. And I hear the same thing. Can I commit to this? Am I confident I can execute upon it? Which goes back to the conversation of scalability. Well, the reality is if we try to do it for 200 or 300 or however many, all households, the answer is probably not. Mm-hmm. But if I'm doing it for the top 20%, now this becomes a reality that maybe we can live with. And, also, it also, like you said, and I loved that you brought this up, the ability to start with what you can do and know that this is a living, breathing resource that every year you can reevaluate, that you can continue to stack. And that creates an even better benefit so that, if you're showing this to clients each year, you can say, hey, here's the new cool stuff that we added. Here's the other new cool 100%. Stuff. So we're not sitting on our hands, just happy with where we're at. We're always looking for ways to continue to raise the bar for our clients. For sure. I say for me, I'd say probably one that I hear too, and I know you've heard this one, and we hear this in the live audience all the time, is advisors saying that they fear offending someone.
Right.
You're telling me I'm going to put all this stuff down on paper, and I'm going to, as some of the things we're going to talk about is part of this, you're going to have the different tiering on there. This is one resource that actually shows differing tiers. And the idea is people are a lot of times we'll hear advisors say, I'm afraid of offending someone.
Yes.
Well, the follow-up question is always, who are you afraid of offending? Mm-hmm. And 9 times out of 10, the answer always comes back to, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to offend a C or D level client. And no disrespect, again, is the fear that your C or D client's going to get upset and they're going to take their C or D assets and go down the street and become a C or D client somewhere else. And look, I say that kind of tongue in cheek. The reality is, look, we're not heartless ghouls. We don't want anybody to hurt someone's feeling. We're not out to offend people. And there's structure that we'll give you. And, as we talk a little bit farther, we'll mention some ideas of of how you mitigate this and what this, but remember what the real intent is about honoring and celebrating our best clients and giving them a way that they can see that on paper. I would say the bigger fear that advisors really should have is the fear that your best clients, that 20% that drives the 80% of your revenues, that they ever get the sense that they're getting treated the exact same way your C and D level clients get treated.
Yep.
Because now you've got a bigger problem. Because
Absolutely.
how many C or D clients do you need to replace one of your AAA level clients? And so having a resource like this was going to speak to some of the things that help, again, as we talked about building that moat. So let's talk more about the why, Alan. So let's talk about some more specifics around the why. So I'll let you kind of kick it off a little bit. Share with us and with the our audience here some ideas around the why.
Sure. So another thing, and I know it's sort of been the ongoing theme throughout this conversation from my end, but it's that level of professional contrast, right? Clients don't know what they're not getting elsewhere. So when you're able to display and show and have that tangible piece that goes through some of those, value adds that you provide that go above and beyond just the typical financial planning duties that you have as a comprehensive financial planner, it's the whole concept of being able to see that value, being reminded of that value, and never second guessing the value or the cost or the expenses that go along with a relationship with a financial professional. So there's that instant comparison when they see that stewardship framework laid out, that they immediately start comparing to their previous advisor, maybe the current advisor that they're working with. And wow, this really does go above and beyond what my expectation was. They want you to do a good job with their finances. That's the benchmark. That's what you should be doing. That's what's expected. When you're able to show them, hey, look at this full list of, 20, 30, 40 things that, as the need comes up for it, we have a solution in place to make sure that this part is taken care of. So the professional contrast aspect right here is just, it's off the charts, right? Another great thing that you're providing here is you're kind of setting up what the expectations are right off the bat. Typically, when the stewardship framework is presented, it's in the latter stages of the onboarding process. So you've gone through the discovery and the fit meeting, and you've maybe money's in motion, implementation sort of in place right now to start transferring assets to the, as the plan prescribes them to. But this is also where things start to shift to the relationship side of things, again, above and beyond the typical financial planning side. So they get to see the expectations. As part of the conversation, you're going to start talking through the tiered level of engagement and what each level of tier means. The single A, the double A, the triple A, each A stands for something. And you're essentially letting them know, this is what a best client or our best relationships look like. They are timely in getting back to us when we need certain things. They get back to us in a short period of time for a signature or a document. They treat our staff with a certain level of respect. So you're essentially imprinting on them. This is what it takes to be a top client. Yeah, the money is important and the alignment of where you fit in that category. But above and beyond that, there are also certain expectations that we want you to follow to maintain that level of status.
I love that you started with the idea of where traditionally this is introduced. We're at the start of a relationship. Yeah. And I think what also is very important to understand is using a tool like this throughout the relationship to prevent, like you said, unclear expectations that can lead to client drift, right? But I think what it also does is it helps to reinforce ongoing value. One of the things that I've been having a lot of conversation about right now as we're looking towards next year, and advisors are wondering, how can I continue to drive client advocacy? Well, the thing you have to understand is the onus is on the advisor to continue to provide value. Well, how do you provide value? Your clients are looking through a window like this. You could do 150 things for them over the life of a relationship, but they focus on 5 things that are important to them now, and really probably just 2 or 3 that are important to them today. And that lens is going to shift over time, as their life unfolds and their needs evolve. They're going to continue to move the needle as far as what's important to them. So how do you continue to bring into focus all the other cool high level, high leverage client experience, elevated, touches, concierge levels, services and tools and resources, technology, events that you provide for your clients. It's on you as the advisor. And so having a physical resource that you can point to, and it's not about readdressing everything on the resource every single time, but in your next strategy and tactical meeting, having a line item that says, what's new at ABC firm? And you say, hey, by the way, before we get started and we start looking at your blocking and tackling, the financial planning stuff that I'm going to do, that's what you pay me for, let me highlight a couple of cool things we've got coming up later in the year. Maybe it's an event. Maybe it's some new technology. So this gives you the ability to bring this document out and allow them to see all of it all over again. You don't have to address all the items. They continue to feel the value and reinforce why they're with you. And this also gets the ability for you to talk about things like the sounding board services, which we haven't talked about, which is a way to present the idea of an introduction as a service you provide, not a favor you ask. And Alan, that's probably another great rare video we could do to kind of help people better understand how that works.
I'll add it to the list.
So let's talk about some key elements of executing. Let's talk about the what of the as we kind of head towards the finish line here today. When it comes to the stewardship framework, physical, tangible resource, whether you put it on the screen or it's a deliverable to your clients, let's talk about some of the key elements. Obviously we're not going to get into all the key elements today, but let's just highlight a couple today. So I'll let you get started first, Alan. Why don't you share a couple of key elements of the stewardship framework?
Sure. So just kind of kicking things off in a general fashion, how do we want it to look visually? And it can't be overcomplicated or too complex, but just in your mind, think through like a tier-based visual layout that speaks to the different levels of engagement. And part of this process, and really to kick things off before we get into the stewardship framework and the advocate, the service matrix, is doing a proper client classification and client segmentation. What do I have? What am I working with? How am I going to tier these out? And really establishing the top of the mountain, the AAAs down to the AA, single A's, the legacy package, or not the legacy package, sorry, the legacy tier, which we'll go into more detail later, but that's essentially the home for the children of your very best clients. And then to kind of round it out, listing out the B and sometimes the C clients on that piece as well.
I love it. Having the segmentation on there. One thing I will touch on is I mentioned earlier, Alan, we're not heartless ghouls. The clarity that we create for some people is even when advisors buy into the idea of doing a stewardship framework, they still get hung up on how do I do that and share this if there's tiering on there.
Yeah.
Traditionally, as we would say, you're going to have your AAAs, your AAs, single A's, your legacy, which are children of your best clients. Outside of that, it would be just maybe your B level clients. And the only reason why I would have B's on there is so that your best clients understand that there is other levels other than just single A, AA, AAA. Otherwise, they're thinking, oh, there's only 3 levels and I'm here. The idea of helping your clients understand that there are other levels reinforces the idea that membership has its privileges. Yes. And it gives your clients a path to continue to grow into your practice and your process, not out of it. If you want to have something separate for your C and D clients, great. I wouldn't show this resource to your C and D clients. This is something that's designed to help reinforce and emphasize, the value to your best clients that you're looking to duplicate. And then, what I will also say is probably another thing that gets a little pushback from advisors are, I don't feel confident in how I would describe. How would I walk through this? Understand that when you're delivering this, there's an emphasis on the deliverables and the why story behind them. So typically I will tell an advisor, pick 3 or 4 key things that you want to highlight. You're not going to go through everything. Let your client ask some questions, but you're going to lean into the why story on a few of those. Include value added touches like family meetings, annual reviews, strategy and tactical meetings, introductions to strategic partners. Understand that this is about highlighting not just some concierge services, but it's also concierge experience. So this should also speak to the high level experience that you're creating for your clients. And there's some nuances here in, how much difference should there be between the AAs and AAAs? How is this about driving advocacy? Well, our AAA tier is actually for our advocate clients. We have scripting and messaging that is detailed in how you would actually execute this to help tell the story that goes to what you were talking about a moment ago, Alan, where it's about helping your clients understand expectations that, hey, look, this is a chance for us to say thank you and honor you for the relationship we have. And here's our commitment to you. And oh, by the way, here's how, this is what each tier means and how everybody falls into them and how one can move from one to another. And so that's something that we clearly delineate, and we help advisors navigate that and really put that to bed. So as we wrap up today, here's what I would say. This is the time of year that I would encourage every advisor. As I said, everybody should have a stewardship framework. A service matrix at the very basic. So I would tell you to reassess your current client experience. And if you already have a current service matrix, to reevaluate that as well, to look for opportunities to elevate the experience, target ways to continue to grow the experience for your clients going forward. And then I would encourage each and every one of you to assess creating a client-facing stewardship framework. So if you don't currently have one, this is a perfect time to say maybe next year is the time that we actually step out on a limb and we take a chance to really drive advocacy and help our clients truly understand the value of our firm. So if you want to learn more about building or evolving your service matrix or developing a stewardship framework and how to implement both, connect with us at usafinancial.com. Make sure you click on the Connect with Us button and we can discuss how you can get started today. So thank you again so much for joining us on another edition of The Rare Advisor. If you like the type of topics that we talk about and you like the content, make sure you click the like and subscribe button. And as we always say, when the why is clear, the how becomes easy. So never lose sight of your why.
This information is for licensed financial professionals only and is not intended for use in soliciting sales from the public. The views expressed represent the opinions of the presenter or their featured guest, not necessarily those of USA Financial or its affiliated subsidiaries. Industry references are generic and not intended to represent actions or beliefs of any individual or entity. Content is only presented to illustrate general principles, beliefs, or ideas and should not be construed as legal or regulatory advice. Trademark and copyright protected. USA Financial and Affiliates.